Y'all, I'm so freaking excited about today's podcast episode. So I am hanging out with my friends, Rachel and Stacey, who are the faces behind Decoding Couples. I saw you guys and met you in real life, like what, a year ago?
Has it been a year?
It's been a year.
Around then.
Oh my
I
gosh.
know. And it's like, I do feel like meeting you guys. There's so few times in my life where you like sit down with people and you're like, my people. And like 100%, I was just like, hell yeah, it feels like we've been friends for a while. So I was very excited to meet you guys, and I'm even more excited to talk shit. Not really talk shit, maybe a little bit of shit.
Constructive.
We're good at that.
Constructive. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit constructive shit on the
Constructive
podcast. Yeah, exactly. TM. That could be a good handle. Yeah. But anyway, so for those of you who are listening and you're like, okay, who are Rachel and Stacey? Rachel and Stacey are the founders of Decoding Couples. They have a podcast, an amazing podcast that's called, actually, I don't even know the name. I just look for Decoding Couples every time I look for it.
Decoding Couples podcast.
That's what I thought. I love that you guys said that together. They have an amazing podcast about like all things relationships that has actually really helped me a lot as well. But you guys are also real life relationship therapists, right?
We're legitimate.
Legit. They're not just like coaches on the internet in the therapy space, which I know is certainly problematic and a whole other topic for another time. But so we're going to dive deep into talking about money and relationships, because I know just even in my experience in talking to my community how much of an issue that is. And so we brought in the experts on communication. So let's dive in and get chatting. For you guys in your private practice, as well as when you're dealing with just your audience, because I know you have Fridays, like confessional Fridays, where people are, putting their deep, dark secrets. You guys have to be following them on, if you're in a relationship or ever hope to be in a relationship, you have to be following Decoding_Couples on Instagram. How often do you guys feel like money comes up as an issue?
All the time.
Yeah, like all the time.
Yeah.
And what is like of the issues that come up around money, if you had to say like top 3 topics, like maybe it's like, how do we spend it, or how do we talk about it? Like, what would you say those top 3 issues are, or that you hear?
Like money and power. I feel like how money impacts the relationship. So who makes more and what that then dictates, like implicitly and explicitly in the relationship. So money and power. I feel like it's like a big one we see all the time.
Yeah.
What do you think, Stace?
I feel like we see a lot around like debt, like talking about like the community, like Feedback Friday stuff. There's always like, my partner hid their debt, or like I'm hiding debt. That is always one that comes up. Yeah, money.
The emergency fund. People get pissed because Stacey and I are really big advocates of having an emergency fund.
Yes, that makes me so happy.
Regardless of who you are, but most female presenting folks do not have emergency funds, or I should say female identifying folks do not have emergency funds. And so we're big advocates of saying, like, always have a rainy day fund. Doesn't matter. It's also no one's business as long as you're taking care of like your shared stuff. And people are, to this day, we get so much crap for it.
And they're pissed about you saying that, or what are they pissed about?
Yeah, like this suggestion that we wouldn't just be banking on our relationship to be financially secure. That maybe there's a world that women take care of themselves just in case. Like, how dare the vulvas?
Yes. Wow, that's shocking to me. And is it the women who are getting defensive, or their partners who are getting defensive?
I think it depends. We have we're like over 80% women identifying. So I think that it still is. We get a pretty good amount of flack from them. And I think it's this idea that you're hiding it from a partner. And I think it speaks to just a larger, right? It's not okay to be autonomous in relationships. So you can't have, and it, again, we could go into all the nuances of like why someone would want to keep that from a partner. But at the end of the day, if your boo is financially autonomous and secure, should that not be the biggest turn on? And you're just like, that is so awesome. You have a 20 grand rainy day fund. Like, it's getting hot in here because I'm getting turned on. When you see that as threatening, I feel like there's so much more going on in your relationship, because how could that not be a benefit in this day and age? So we're always fascinated, and the DMs are pretty harsh. The comments are not nice.
It's like a prenup, it's kind of the same thing. Like, if feel like people get mad about the same thing. Like, how dare you suggest this safety when it should just be enough together?
It kills me seeing that, because it just goes to show me how like brainwashed some of us are by just societal standards, where it's like, this is, and really by patriarchal standards, because it's like, when you think about a prenup, the people who are the loudest about wanting prenups are always men. They're like, yeah, protect myself from gold diggers. But then when I suggest exactly like that everybody needs a prenup, then I think that even if you're like, I don't have anything, I don't need to protect anything. What if you someday do? What if you start a business? That business becomes half your partner's if you don't have a prenup, depending on what state you live in. But what I always tell people is like, even just having that conversation about a prenup is going to tell you a lot about your partner. Because if your partner is pissed and is like, absolutely not, do you not even trust me, blah, blah, blah. Imagine what they would be like in a divorce. Like, are you kidding? You're getting like the preamble. You're getting the preview.
It's not good. It's not good.
And this is like, as you're putting together a prenup, imagine what it's going to be like. Like, you're supposed to like each other at this point. If you're preparing to get married, you like we're under the assumption that you like each other. So it's like, imagine if things turn toxic or more toxic, and like now we're dealing with the divorce, and the stakes are so much higher. So, oh man, it's gonna be hard keeping this under an hour, because there's so many sidebars that I'm like, I want to just like dive into. So I'm gonna have to try really hard to be like, all right, brain, don't get distracted. Don't get distracted. We need to give tips.
Focus.
And also, I do feel like we have to give some context to you two as individuals, because if I remember correctly, Rachel, you love talking about money. Like, this is like you're a fan of this. And Stacey, it's not your favorite topic, right?
Not my favorite topic whatsoever. So this is good, because you get both perspectives of someone who's like taught about money, feels confident talking about money, is good with money. And I'm like, and I learn from Rachel too all the time. So
and I love that. I think that's so important to get both perspectives, because, you know, Rachel and I talking together would probably be like, yeah, everybody should easily be able to talk about a prenup. And then Stacey's like, well, hold up. We got to calm down. So, okay. So I want to go back to like those three main issues that you guys helped identify. So number one is that I love how you described it too, as money and power, because it's that whole idea of not only power in terms of income earning, but also in terms of spending power, right? So when you're navigating a conversation like that with a couple, obviously I know what I would do in that situation, but I'm curious, what are some of the first kind of things and tips and like practices that you do with them to kind of help navigate that conversation?
I think, go ahead. No, go ahead, my love.
Thank you, honey. I think even starting to define what that is for each person, because I think when it gets to the point where it's an issue, where you're realizing that there is value and power and all of the stuff that's showing up in the relationship, that's a pretty good sign that it's never been outwardly talked about, that this is something that is just ingrained in who we are in the relationship. And then all of a sudden, when it becomes an issue, it's like, we got to detangle and define and bring to light what is even happening here before we can do anything about it. So I think first step is honestly like looking it in the eye and having all the partners be honest about what money means to them, what, you know, value and power they assign to it, and start from scratch, working like from those set definitions.
Right. Of even like, how would you describe your role in our finances in this situation, and being like, hearing what the other person thinks, I'm sure is also enlightening, especially if it doesn't align with what the other person is thinking. And then, so beyond defining it, I can only imagine what an interesting situation it is to have that issue be brought up in like a therapy session, or even in your Decoding Couples platform. Because it's like, my first thought is, do you then talk about how to solve this? Do you then talk about like, do you guys combine finances? Do you keep it together? I assume you don't necessarily go into like the tactics, or do you? Like, is that something that is part of it, or is it more just like providing resources?
I mean, I do a little bit, but I feel like there is a line that therapists don't cross. And so, and obviously in the relationship coaching, which we're doing on DC, we don't cross that. You know, you stay in your lane in that way, because it's not so much about, like, if I'm counseling you and I'm saying, hey, your guys' stuff is all together, but that's creating some issues here and here, I could logistically help you go, here's some options, get separate accounts, but that's really not what's at like the core of it. A lot of times it's like secrecy around spending, it's mistrust around finances, it's lack of knowledge and someone feeling really intimidated at someone else using that against that person. It's someone feeling burnt out in the financial provider role and feeling like it's so many other things. So
Right.
then because they're not talking about that, they create these structures, like they create joint or separate, or you only get access to this one checking account and then there's just no other conversation. So to answer your question, I personally go into that, but just as like a way to talk about the deeper kind of stuff that's going on. I rarely see couples sit down super open with their money and their money shit and their money shame and their money goals, and then go, as now that we know all this, how many checking accounts do you want to have? How many are saved? How much is going to retirement? And then you have a financial person take over. But it's often the reverse. We create those options to protect ourselves, or to hide our money shame, or to deal with the discomfort, or to play a role that we've all been taught. Like, let my, you know, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, let my husband deal with all the money. Hee hee. So I think that those decisions are all made inverse. And I think all of us are trying to change that.
That's so interesting, because it sounds like what you're saying is, in a nutshell, we have to get very clear on what the issue is. Like, what are these feelings coming from? Because then if we can really, really dig deep into what the actual issue is, then it's easy to find different solutions. It's easy to find different tactics. But what's really hard is uncovering, why do you feel powerless? Or why do you feel like this is unequal? Why do you feel like this is unfair? Then we run into the issue of communication. How do we open people up to that? Because it's like, yeah, I can talk about that. Yeah, I can identify that. So we're kind of skipping ahead because I still want to talk about the debt thing too. But this is, we'll
circle back. We'll circle back.
We're going to circle back to it. So in that conversation, would you guys say a lot of what you do is focusing on communication? You guys might not be watching the video, but Rachel's eyes just went,
God, yeah.
Yeah. It was basically what her eyes said.
Yes, I will put words to Rachel's eyes. Yes.
Okay, so then if you're like, for example, when we're talking about the power dynamics and money, and you've got a couple who's coming to you and they're coming with you like, here's all the tactics that we have separate bank accounts, we have all this, but they're still complaining about the issue, and it's clear that it's not like whatever they're doing is not working to solve that issue. But they're so closed off around money and around talking about it. How do you start to like peel the resistance back and open people up? Like, what are some tips around communication that may help people feel safe?
I think you got to individually go back a little bit before sometimes it's easy to open up about what's going on in the moment. Like, I know Rach and I always think it's so important to ask and talk about, like, what were you taught about money? Like, how were finances handled in your family? What did you see? Like, was there money scarcity? Was there, was it
understand
there was so much wealth, like, I think starting kind of back and working forward, especially in couples therapy, is the best tool to be able to get people to understand how it's showing up in their current relationship.
And even have empathy, like for themselves and for their partner, I imagine.
Yes, because defensiveness in communicating about money, I mean, through the roof. So I think on the, to put someone on the spot and be like, what's your like money shame? Or like, why are you so protective of your money? Like, that's, people are going to put their walls totally up. But if we can ease in, if we could hear each other and hear ourselves talk about even where these value systems come from and talking about that, it can kind of loosen up the here and now.
I love that. It's so cool too, because like one of the first things we do inside the Lazy Investors course, one of the first things that's in like my money guide is like talking about exactly that. What is your experience? What is because so few people actually think back to like, what was it like? How did that impact me now? And what I always find is that people either do exactly what their parents did or they do the exact opposite. It's very rare that somebody has found like a happy medium unless they have like done the work to get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of why I'm also like, Stacey and I have an interesting dynamic because we also run another business together, right? Like, we run Decoding Couples, but our private practices are separate. So we have to talk about money a lot, and our own money issues and our ways of going about it have come up. And I think what was really cool, I'm just going to use you, Stacey, as an example, is your exact point you made, Chloe, is that for Stacey to be just uncomfortable around money, to break that cycle, she went and got educated about it. So instead of staying in the stuck cycle of how it is in her marriage or how is it with me, because I'm more dominant about the money, she like did the thing that she didn't have modeled to her, but that also wasn't either of the current dynamics she was in. And she started educating herself about it and making changes. And I've watched you, Stace, just like really grow around money. And I think that's even not talked about a lot at all. So not only money origin and like talking about your money story, but there's an onus on all of us to educate ourselves on just the basic principles. It is overwhelming. It is scary. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I still ask a million questions every time I make a financial decision, and I go back and forth, and then I go back and I go forward. That's really normal, but I feel like it's also not fair to like a partner to have to educate you on all this stuff. And there's no shame that you don't know, but use Stace as your billboard, because she was like, I'm not going to rely on either of these relationships. I'm going to actually take it into my own hands and start digesting stuff, even if it's hard, even if it's uncomfortable. That changes everything. And then you feel also, going back to the power thing, more empowered, on an even keel. That takes away and eats away at the shame, because now you realize it wasn't that you didn't know, you just didn't know what it was called. You just didn't know a name for it.
Oh, yeah. And I love that you mentioned that, because I think it's so true in so many ways, and it helps in so many different ways as well, because it's like, not only are you taking this thing that can feel so overwhelming and so anxiety provoking, and you're just exposing yourself to it more. It's like you're literally desensitizing yourself to like money is this big, scary thing that I cannot control, that I cannot, master. And you're like, I'm just going to spend 10 minutes looking at this today, or I'm going to look at my bank account today, or, depending on what degree of anxiety and overwhelm you feel about it. But it's also like exactly what you said, having the education, having the knowledge, that's going to make the fear so much less. And it's like, I was trying to think of like something, and as you were talking about it, of something that is so present in our life every single day, that like has and carries the same amount of shame with it if you don't know about it. And I don't know if there is anything directly, like the only thing I can think about is like maybe eating healthy, but even then there's so many other, like it's not
sex, maybe
sex. That's what came to my mind.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, wait. All right. Unpack that for me. Explain. I love that came up, because that's not what I would have thought of.
She was like, eating healthy. I was like, oh, shit. Yeah. Now, like, okay,
I was like, I could. Yeah, because you have this shame of like, maybe you don't know what you're doing, or you're afraid to go get help because it's like, I should already know this, or it's embarrassing, or whatever it is.
Same thing for sex, though. Plug that in for sex.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Didn't even think about that, but it makes sense in our like Puritan culture. So
100%.
Oh my God. I just can't recommend to my listeners enough to go listen to their podcast. So plug there again. Okay. So then in terms of when you mentioned debt and the emergency fund, the only thing that surprised me was the emergency fund and the defensiveness. But at the same time, I can see like somebody going into a therapy session, not expecting to be told, hey, you need to have an emergency fund for this and this reason. But when it comes to like essentially financial infidelity, which is like saying, hey, surprise, I have all this debt that you didn't know about, and you're latched onto me, or you're hooked in, or the sunk cost fallacy. Kind of tell me how you guys navigate that, because financial infidelity can be a very, very big deal.
It's a huge trust issue.
It's a massive one.
I don't know that either of us have ever said financial infidelity, but that is like
the it is now.
So often we think of we think of financial infidelity as like gambling, having a gambling problem and not telling them. We think about financial infidelity as somebody having a credit card that they're going off and spending, or taking money that was in the joint account, wiping it out for something else like that was not discussed. So like we don't often think about financial infidelity in like the like hidden debt, but I think it would fall under that bucket.
Oh, 100%. Making purchases without your knowledge, making big financial decisions without your knowledge. And I think that's why the emergency fund thing makes us laugh, because when you are, let's say I have a nest egg, and it, whether I'm transparent about it or not, that nest egg or that rainy day fund is not being used to like coerce or change a behavior of the couple. And I think that's what makes it the difference. Like, if sometimes you're not in if you're not in a healthy dynamic, I understand why you might not share your rainy day fund. Do we encourage you to share it, like in terms that it exists? Yes. And I think this is why it's hilarious that people get upset, because if I have a rainy day fund, it only really benefits everyone. Again, if I'm not taking away from like our shared expenses and what our home needs and what our relationship needs. But what you're talking about, you're hiding those things because you didn't get the desired behavior, feedback, whatever it is from the couple or from the relationship. And that is hugely problematic. Like that is not okay. And to Stacey's point, how violating is that? Like, how do you trust someone when you find out they're like, oh yeah, I took out a loan and it was for 50K. It's not under your name though. Is that cool? Like what the, like you don't, doesn't get a lot of like, oh, that hurts. Yeah, that would affect me.
It affects us in such a huge way. I mean, it's massive. And it's like such a big hit to the trust. Yeah. Because it's like, it puts you both. And assuming that you're in a partnered, like marriage relation, impacts you both financially speaking, and finances obviously impact every area of our lives. So when that comes up in a session, how do you talk through it with somebody? What are like some of the tips that you say, like, hey, this is something that like, here's the next step. This is what has to happen next.
Well, I think it would be like anything, to your point of financial infidelity, of any time when there is a breach of trust. Right. Obviously, if we're just talking about something financial that happened, then we need to look at like, how do we explore the details and explain the details of what happened? What does repair need to look like? How are we taking accountability for that? I would imagine that if somebody is making like a huge financial decision or has like $100,000 in debt that they've been hiding for years, there's probably other issues in the relationship. So we would look at, right, like how it all relates. And then how do you regain that trust? What are the repair activities, the trust building activities that need to happen? Is it financial transparency? Is it having a complete game plan of how they're paying down that debt? Is it, some kind of game plan, so you all are now working on something mutually together, like it's going to be whatever specific dependent. But yeah, I mean, I think transparency, ownership and responsibility, and then how do you rebuild trust to repair from something like that?
And I love that you mentioned the like coming to the table with a plan to improve it or remove it, because I mean that's the same thing when we're dealing with like infidelity, like when, hey, this is what happened, here's everything I'm going to do to like regain your trust if you're willing to continue opting into this relationship with me to rebuild that trust. But like that has to come from the person who did it. Like, because if it doesn't, I'm like, hey, you cheated on me, here's everything you have to do in order for me to trust you again. It's like, again, I'm the one who's doing all the emotional labor here. Why? Like they just got an easy pass of like, here's all the things you have to do. But it's like, it's got to come from that person, right?
Yeah. And like Stacey's point though, as much as yes, an infidelity, if you are being betrayed, like the betrayer is the one that would have to do a lot of the work. And so in financial infidelity, you could say the same. And a thing we get a lot of shit for is affairs, right? Whether they're financial or emotional or physical, are often, there's more going on. Like it's rarely just about that act. And to Stacey's point. So yes, Chloe, while you're saying, that person has to, what they're going to do to change it, it's probably not isolated. Very rarely. And I don't know, in Stacey, your professional experience, but if I've ever seen where finances are truly the only area where there's shit going on. So whether the breach in trust is infidelity like sex or emotional cheating, or it's around money, there's probably bigger things going on, which means there's probably roles that everyone is playing. Not saying you're at fault for the $100,000 debt, but what are you contributing to the dynamic? Have you turned a blind eye? Have you been a spender and you're like, I've never initiated a conversation without a budget. I never look at our joint account. I never ask to see our taxes. Yes. Are you explicitly not doing the $100,000 in debt? Sure. But are you implicitly enabling that very behavior that's now screwing you? Yeah. So that's why breaches in trust are also an opportunity, like you said, Chloe, that everyone gets, once it's all out on the table, everyone can then choose. Are we all willing to put in the work and do our part or not? And most people are like, I can't take the responsibility. I don't want to do the work.
Yeah. Oh, yes. No, even as you were saying that, it's like, it's so nuanced. It's very rarely, even if it seems like this is such an obvious, like atrocious act.
Correct.
How dare you keep this from me? It's like, what if you weren't a safe person for them to bring this to? What if it was like, you know what I mean? What if you're giving me shame and I've only ever gotten shame from you? What if it's like, so I can definitely see that. And it's going to vary so greatly in so many different scenarios. So I'm glad you said that, because it's really hard for any of us to take personal responsibility.
Has she been listening to the podcast? I think she's been listening to the podcast. You could sit here Like that.
I lost my headphones.
That was fire.
Well,
like, have I been a safe place for you to share that? I was like, in my head, I'm like, oh my God, have I been a safe place? I don't think I know I haven't. Like,
it's because it's hard. And it's like, especially if there's already like resentment there, it's so hard to be like, if there's no respect and there's no resentment, how could you be a safe place for this person? And then obviously that's a sign of much, much larger issues that may not be solvable.
Yeah. That's why the preventative conversations are so big, but we have so much shame around it in our society, right? Like, don't talk about money too early. Like, don't bring this stuff up. Yeah. Don't bring up the prenup, like all of that. But it's like, man, but when you're a few years in, life gets crazy, resentments are already building, stuff like this happens. But it's like, if you have those hard conversations early, if you work through your money shit, like so much of it could be prevented.
Yeah, but you got to be proactive about it and early on. So that's
why
we're out here doing the work. All right. I know Stacey's got to, or not Stacey, Rachel's got to go off in about 5 minutes. So I have 2-3 more questions that I want to dive into first. Cool. First, we can't have a podcast episode about couples and money without talking about money management styles for couples. I am curious. What is
breathing?
Deep breathe.
Deep breathe. You know what, Stacey, you can share what you're comfortable with. If you're not comfortable sharing something, I'm not going to force you to tell me. I know Rachel's ready and willing. So you guys know that I'm a big fan of, or at least Rachel knows, I'm a big fan of having a joint account for joint expenses, separate accounts for fun money, emergency fund, the oh, holy shit, everything has gone to hell fund, especially for women. So that's but I also recognize that doesn't work for everybody. And that's okay, as long as each person has access to their own money. Like, that to me is a non-negotiable. What you guys are talking about, the emergency fund, especially for women, having that just set aside somewhere in a separate bank account, non-negotiable, like, period, end of story. What are your guys' takes?
Go, Stacey. You go first. Yeah, Stacey. Yeah.
She's like,
what you said.
Practicing a muscle.
I think that is the ideal way to have money in a partnership. Like, yes, I would agree. That is not my setup in my relationship, which is why I'm sweaty, because mine is very separate and it has caused a lot of issues. So if I was to do everything over again of what I know now personally, a decade into my relationship, and what I know professionally of hearing what couples fight about and not about, joint expenses, but having, separate money for, whatever you want your separate money to be.
Yeah, whatever it is.
The life you're building together, have those things together, figure out how you put in, like, I almost think like a ratio style, like somebody makes, so much 4 times the amount of you, then they put in 4 times the amount of you, but you pick your ratio, you put it in.
Yes. We are not 50-50 people here. So
you're 50-50 bullshit.
Yeah. I know that's an unpopular opinion on the internet, but I think that it is so much more nuanced than 50-50, especially like when we think about financial infidelity, and even going back to what you said about, are you creating a safe place for this person? I remember, Am I the Asshole thread, where there was a guy who was dating a teacher.
So good.
And he was going on all these like luxury experiences and things like that, and wanting her to come along. And she's like, yeah, I'll come. There was literally a time where she decided to not eat more than 1 meal a day to be able to afford all the stuff he wanted to do. And it's like, first off, you have to ask yourself, do you even love this person? She's literally starving herself in order to meet you where you're at. And like, if you really truly cared about this person, you would not want her to be going through that. Like, that's 50-50 doesn't make sense. If you've either got to be willing to compromise your lifestyle in order to be able to do something that they can afford, or you have to be willing to pay for them, to bring them up to your level, or you have to realize maybe this isn't the relationship I want if those things are so important to you. So anyway, that was just a side tangent, because I was like, oh yes, not 50-50 people. Rachel, I'm pretty sure that's the same approach you go with, right?
Yeah, my partner and I have joint accounts for anything joint. So with the house, with the kids, everything's in a joint account. And then we have our own individual savings. We have our own individual checking. Our rule is, if communal money is anywhere, you have to have communal access. So like investment accounts, he's got all the passwords, I've got all the passwords, because I'm the more dominant financial one. Like, I'm the one that checks our bank account every other day, checks whatever statements and stuff like that. But if it's communal money is working anywhere, you need to be able to have access to that. So even if it's not something he's interested in, or that's just not where we've agreed, right? Like it's definitely not 50-50 when it comes to our finances in terms of how we manage it. Yeah, you have to have access to that. And ironically, what we're all talking about, we used to have the ratio of he made way more money than I did. So I did not contribute as much as he did. And then we have constantly reevaluated that every couple years. And so now it's actually an even split because I make more money than him. But it's 50-50 right now. So even though I make more, I'm just doing 50-50 because that works for us and all these whatever else we have going on. But the point is we've constantly been reevaluating it and talking about it. What feels fair? How is that showing up? How do you value this? How do you, the way something is spent, it's all nuanced and you have to talk about it. Saying I do to a specific financial arrangement is a kiss of death on like the day of. If you don't ever visit that conversation again, it's not going to go well, whether you get married or not. It's something you have to revisit. So again, I think it's just like not even just a structural thing, but also having the conversation over and over again. But yes,
it's a living thing. And that's the thing is our life changes, our needs change, our financial goals change all the time. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of educating yourself, because it's like, you could come through and like, I think some people, when they come into like the Lazy Investors course, they're like surprised that I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm like, you do understand the whole point of this is to educate you so that in 10 years, when your goals change, you can make that decision. You have the tools, you know what to do. And if you don't, you're always going to be relying on me or some financial advisor. So
tell me what to do.
Right. Same
with
like, you're like, all I heard from that.
Tell me what to do. And then in 10 years, tell me what to do again. No.
Answers.
I love it. Oh my God. Cracking me up. All right. I got 2 more fun questions for you, because I know we could talk about this all day and we'll just have to have you guys back on in a few months. But all right. For both of you, my first fun question, is there anything you're binging right now? Like a podcast series, a television series, a book series, anything at all?
Oh my God. We're both really into Vanderpump Rules right now. I wouldn't call it binging, more than just watching the minute it's live.
Yes, obsessed. I love it.
I'm binging Selling Sunset on Netflix.
Oh yeah, already done it. Done it. I love it. Love it.
I'm not binging anything. I just watch like anything Top Chef related, and then 90 Day Fiance. I don't miss a freaking episode.
Amazing. My mom and I are 90 Day. She's more the 90 Day Fiance one, but I can't wait to the moment where I run into Big Ed here in San Diego. One of my friends.
It will happen.
Yeah, one of my friends has already met him, and I was like, I need to see this just because I need to. And like, she's so obsessed that for her birthday, her workplace bought a cameo from Nicole. Oh. You remember Nicole and Azan?
Yeah.
Yep, got a cameo from freaking Nicole.
Stacey, birthday idea, 90 Day Fiance cameo.
I got you.
Like, writing it down. Yep. All right. Yep. And then my final question is money related. What is your very first money memory?
Oh my gosh. I think like I've always liked doing the lemonade stand stuff, like when I was little, but my first real, when I was like, oh, I think this is really cool. I like this feeling. I took out whole life insurance at 21 when I was a cocktail waitress in Hawaii. And I'll never forget the meeting, and the look on the guy's face was like, okay, you got like a premier 90 million star rating, the highest you could get. And like, why are you doing this? And I was like, I read this book called Smart Women Finish Rich, and it says to do this here. And so I'm doing it. He's like, you know, that this is like, this is incredible. I was like, okay, it's like $100 a month or something like that. But I remember feeling like, oh, I want to feel this again around money. Like this was he was like, what are you doing here? And I remember being like, I have this cash to deposit. He's like, you don't do that. This isn't a bank. We just fill out the paperwork. I was like,
that is adorable.
But I was really proud of myself.
That is so funny. And I also do like that your first experience or your first memory is a positive one, because even the lemonade stand is a positive one, and you have a pretty positive and passionate outlook on money today. So now, Stacey, what's yours?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the earliest, but the most significant that stands out to me is I remember maybe like in middle school being like, hey, Mom, like I want to go to the mall, or like, we're going to go to the mall together, like my friends. can I have like $20 or something? And her being like, sure, you just need to like do X, Y, and Z, you know, like chores around the house for this. And I was like, I'm good. I won't go to the mall this time. And I like just basically waited it out until she would give me money, and I like didn't work for it. And I mean, I think that's really representative.
That's amazing. Oh my God. That's what's so funny about like asking that question is it's like most of the time it's very telling about like your views on money, unless you've worked to like change it, you know, that's adorable. You're like, yeah, I'm good. And that
it's fine. Let me know when you want to give it to me for free later. Goodbye.
This is kind of related. My friend Shannon Weinstein, she's a CPA. Her parents did the same thing where they're like, in order for you to get money, you have to work for it. She's like, nah, I'm good. And so her dad recognized that she was not motivated in that way. So he was like, she doesn't want to do work, but how about I find a way to reward her for like knowledge and smarts? So he would quiz her randomly. He'd be like, hey, I'll get you an ice cream cone if you can tell me the capital of Rhode Island. And so that was kind of like his incentive for like developing any level of like money hungriness in her. But she was like, I was so lazy, I just didn't want to work. But like I liked like flexing my brain, you know?
See, that's smart. That's clever. So representative to my discomfort of talking about money. I've also feel like when my parents did that, it was like very random. Like I was like, what is this shenanigans? Like, you're going to try this now when I'm like 14? Like, no, I'm good. You know, but then they didn't find a different way to go about it. We literally just dropped it for a couple of weeks, and then I was like, can I go to the mall? And they were like, sure, here's $20. And I was like,
that's so funny. And no wonder then that like money feels like almost this mystical thing, because it's like it was not structured. It was not like this thing that felt accessible or even easy to obtain necessarily. So that's so interesting.
That's a good question. That's funny.
There you go. You can, if you guys are ever finding that question in your students, or not your students, your patients, because I always think it's so interesting. And I also think that almost every entrepreneur I have had, their first money memory was something like what Rachel said, which was, oh, I had a lemonade stand. Like that was her first answer. I have had so many people on this show who were candy drug dealers, where they would like buy the candy for really cheap in bulk, and then they'd go to school and they'd sell it for like an up cost. And I'm like, that's amazing. Wild. And it's because
that actually triggered an earlier memory for me. I must have been, because it was before we went to San Diego, so I must have been in like first or second grade, and I would make little bead bracelets for people at my school and sell them.
Oh, that's so
bracelet dealer. Yeah, you know, for like $1.
Entrepreneur.
There we go. See, I have a healthy money mindset. Get Rachel back in here.
You got to tell Rachel. Yes, I love that. That's so cute. All right, so we've got Stacey on still. Stacey, tell us, where can everybody find Decoding Couples? What are ways to work with you guys right now? And just, promote yourself, shout yourself out.
Yeah. So our biggest platform is Instagram, decoding_couples. As you mentioned, we are on there daily, churning out the good stuff. So feel free to follow us over there. And then relevant to this conversation, one of our courses, Before the Next Step, we literally give you all of the conversation starters, questions, and skills to be able to navigate important topics like money, but also communication, mental health, family, controversial topics, all of that stuff, those preventative conversations, so you can have a long-term healthy relationship, are all in that course. So check out Before the Next Step. We can give you the link to put in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put that. And then you guys also have a communications course, correct?
Yeah. And then we have Relationship Roadmap, which is more for like established relationships that maybe are feeling a little stuck, if you will. Yeah. And going through the roadmap of like understanding your attachment styles, kind of what triggers one another. Yeah. Then changing your communication around, and then like getting your sex and intimate life back on point.
I love that. Fantastic. And I just want to like shout out to people who are like, I have had friends in the past who are like going through it with their partner, and they're like, he's not open to therapy or she's not open to therapy. I do feel like courses can be that kind of bridge where it's like, okay, you're not interested in couples counseling. However, what if we did this course together? Or what if we, downloaded this guide and like worked through it together? I feel like people, especially men who have not been as exposed to therapy or realize that's something that's not going to invalidate their masculinity, I feel like it can be really, really helpful. And I'm in their relationship roadmap course. So say hi in there.
Yeah. I feel like that's some of the best feedback that we get. Like, oh, my partner really didn't want to do this, but then we didn't. And it's been so helpful. It's like,
well,
awesome. It feels so good.
Communication's literally a part of everything. And it's so hard. Like, it's so hard. It's just like money. We were not taught this stuff. We were not given the skills to learn how to be in a relationship. And like the only example that we have is whoever our parents or guardians were most of the time. And so amazing resources out there. Awesome. Stacey, thank you for coming on and talking about money. I'm proud of you.
Course.
Thank you so much for listening to the Money Bear podcast. If you've made it this far, do us a favor, take 2 seconds, rate, review, and subscribe. It seriously means the world to me. And if you just take a second to do that, I will appreciate you endlessly. And if you do, let me know on Instagram and I'll thank you personally. So got that. And of course, since we were talking about anything financial on this show, please note that nothing on this show is intended as financial advice. I don't know you, unfortunately, and because of that, I cannot tell you what to do with your money. You got to work with a financial professional who knows your situation, who is preferably a fiduciary, and keep in mind that everything that we talk about on this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It's all my opinion. So there's that. If you want to see our full terms and conditions, head on over to the show notes. And while you're there, we've got free resources for you to get started on your money journey down in the show notes as well, including a free guide to help you with your budgeting templates and budgeting tutorials and investing 101, understanding the different accounts that are out there. All that good stuff is inside of my free guide, which is also available at thelazyinvestorscourse.com/guide. And if you're ready to take our relationship to the next level, also, I've got a free investing class that is available at thelazyinvestorscourse.com/webinar. We host it once a month. If you're ready to take our relationship to the next level, I am also hosting a monthly investing class. And that investing class, you can find the times we're offering it this month at thelazyinvestorscourse.com/webinar. That link is in the show notes as well. And that's where you have the chance to meet me live and ask those money questions live. It's a good time. We've had over 20,000 people as of recording this join or register. And it's always nice to meet you guys. So I hope to see you there. Again, all that is available down in the show notes. So thank you again for coming and listening. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next week.